I don't think I'll be doing anything else on the plot today. It's just not safe really. I'm very grateful that I didn't have to work my way down to the compost area of old, and that my travel distance now is that much reduced. I noticed those pavers moving a little bit. They will, and I'll have to be putting sand underneath them when I come to the spring and I know things have firmed up. Right, I think it's time to go home and have a cup of coffee. It's not nice out here. Well, the ground is incredibly wet. I think the last time I was videoing in the rain, you could see that this was full of water. Well, all that water has drained away, and all I'm left with is, well, manure, which is fine. I'm not going to try and work against the flow here. It's still very wet, and this path will probably end up looking something like the area that I used to keep my compost bins in, which is really just a layer of decomposing manure, and it just means that the weed growth is almost nothing when that's the case, and it's just fine to walk on. So I'm not going to fight it, I'm going to work with it. So those 3 bins now, which I sort of took up another level 2 or 3 days ago, are now sitting at 60-70 degrees centigrade, and it just shows you how quickly it can shift. That's not 70 degrees centigrade, it is 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 20 degrees centigrade, and which is plenty warm enough at the minute. So this is where I'm going to end up with the barrels, I believe. I'm going to move this net. I'm sort of moving things around for the sake of it now, which I really don't like to do, but there's not a lot of alternatives. Right, and this area then, if I could just get 3 or 4 of those barrels down and just see how it works out, and then when I want to work in here I can just slot them alongside the polytunnel. And I've got this bucket full of sand which I lifted from this area, which is going to be the solution to any of my paving stones that have dipped during the winter months, and they will dip. So I'm going to have a bit of a tidy up and sort out, see if I can shufty that a little bit that way, and then see if I can get some of those barrels over and have a look. So this is my neighbour's plot, but it gives you some sort of idea of what I've got in mind. So these 4 barrels here have just been raised slightly, or at least are of a level that means they even out in terms of the water. And so if one gets filled up, it just runs into the next and into the next and into the next, and they stay this full for as long as, well, the water lasts really, and then if you get more rainfall, so it goes on. So I'm thinking something of this ilk over in that area, and I'm wondering whether I can actually stagger them as well, so that there's 4 here, but I think I've got more that I could use them for. So if I could get 5 or 6 together by just slotting one in the spaces and connecting them in a very similar way. I've certainly got plenty of this blue hose. So that's the plan, and well, let's get some over and we'll see how it goes. Well, these can go out of the way, but they are going to be useful, I know that. Okay, well, these are sort of 50%, a spider in there which I just saved, 50% full, so I'm going to have to empty some water here, which is going to make this area pretty wet. But this is the time of year to do that, rather than when my neighbour here is starting to use these beds for growing. So we're going to get very wet. Now, I did put a stone in the bottom of each of these just to give them some weight while they weren't full. So I'll put that to one side and get on with the rest. Well, I've sort of tried them in this area now, and well, I was having a conversation with Tufty, who is one of the subscribers who comments pretty much every video. Thanks, Tufty. And he was saying how my thought process about maintaining a decent walkway so that I can work around it, he's always found to be a really important one, and I agree. And I think here, this first barrel gives me about 2 foot, which enables me to get the wheelbarrow up and towards the back of the polytunnel. There's probably space to put another small one when I move the garlic out. I've got a small green one there, but you don't really get the opportunity to double up on the barrel widths probably until you get past this point. So I think we're going to end up with a row at nice level, different heights slightly, but having that net result of what I just showed you over on Adrian's plot, where they can feed into each other when they get, fed with water. And I don't know whether I'm going to be feeding that water from my neighbour, or whether in fact I can work out a way of getting it from the shed that's down there in this direction. I've got plenty of that blue hose, so I'm thinking it might well be possible, maybe coming out the top of one of the IBC tanks, so that the IBC tanks fill up from the shed roof, and the IBC tank then overflows into these, giving me a constant stream of water that I'm gathering from rainfall, which is what I'd like to do. Okay, I'll have a little look at this area now and see if I can just work out how that'll look. So this one I think can go up there when the garlic comes out. Pop it there for now, and then that really just leaves me 2. Now I think it might make sense, in the interest of not having to send water a huge distance, of just carrying on the row. And well, they don't come as far as I thought they would, which was the whole idea of bringing them over and taking a look. There's a fine line here between moving everything into my working space and it getting in the way, and actually knowing what I want to end up doing. So I think I've got to bring it over and have a look as I've done. So I've got one more barrel which could be in the line. Again, I would have to get the heights right, and I've actually got quite a lot of space behind here now, so I don't know, we'll see. It could come right back here. I'll just put this one here for a moment. Yeah, I could probably work something out like that. My neatness requirement says get it straight, but yeah, maybe something like that. That gives me an idea of the space. And I think then it's a case of shed and 2 IBC tanks. Whether I route the water around the one side of the roof back round so that all the water lands in this side of the shed, or whether I have a tank either side, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, that's working out quite well. And I don't think I'm going to spend a lot of time trying to level this. I am going to cover it so I don't get a lot of weed growth. And then I think I'll put my effort into getting the heights right rather than leveling the soil. And then I can look at what I need to do with levels going in that direction. Okay, I've sort of been putting off a job that I knew I had to do, which is a little bit more of my compost movement so I get out of that area down there. This really is one of the hardest times on the allotment, because when it gets so wet, everything becomes that much more difficult to do. And of course, it's not pleasant being out in it either. So the quicker I get this out of the way, the better. And I'm heading towards jobs that probably will need doing inside the polytunnel and inside the shed. And today's a bit of an exception, really. It's certainly been raining for the last few days, very heavily indeed. Right, let's get this full. I'll move it. I can't think that I'm going to be able to move many of these because it's just so slippery. We'll see. Right, I've got to get the weeds out of this bed before I put that compost underneath this purple sprouting broccoli, but since I've taken the net off of this, it's taken a bashing. We've all had some pretty dreadful weather, that's for sure, and one or two of those days of torrential rain were accompanied by a lot of wind, and having removed the net, well, it's just knocked a few of these over, so I'm going to tie them up. It's so tempting just to walk away from this because it's a bit of a faff, but the reality is you've worked pretty hard to get to this stage where you've got a mature plant that hopefully very soon will be giving you good amounts of food, and therefore it's worth spending just a few minutes tending to it, because losing it would be a real shame. Right, and last one here. I think I've got a few more over on that other bed by the shed. There we go. Right, I'm just going to clear out the weed, which I can see now. The snow is gone, and we'll get this covered. I think this is going to be the last one of these for today. It's pretty challenging getting them up here on the cold weather and the damp. Right. It's also very claggy. I really should have kept this covered, but I didn't, so I'm paying the price for that now because it's got a lot more moisture in it than I needed it to. There we go. Right, I've got a couple of other jobs to finish off with. Let's get those done. Well, I put these courgettes in here the other day because they were only used for decoration and they were always destined for the compost heap. But if you leave them whole, they do take a long time to break down. So if you're putting anything in your compost bin that's remotely whole, it does benefit from being chopped up, and the seeds in here won't come to anything once it gets up to heat. And I think what I'm going to be doing with this compost heap, which is done quite well, is top it off at some point with some of my horse manure. I've got plenty more deliveries coming, and it'll help to get the temperature up in this one, and I'll need to cover it up to do so as well. Right, last job of the day, I think. Well, I've got these few pots of spent compost left, and they're going to go into that second unplanned raised bed that I made, which still needs just a little bit more in it. And that'll mean everything that I have left after that, which is still down there in a composter in a green container, then that can probably end up going in the carrot bed in the polytunnel, because I do want to put more spent compost on top of what I've got. Right, that's a full barrow load. I think that'll probably top it off. It gives me 3 empty pots. I'd like to just go down this path, but those old planks I've put as a border, they do get in the way now. So I think I'm going to be getting those out pretty soon. They got holes in and they're not really doing very much, so I think they're coming out sooner rather than later. Right, let's get this last barrel in. One more. Right. Bit of a rake over, and we're pretty much done. The evening sun, or the late afternoon sun, is starting to come through now, which is rather nice. There we go. Well, I do hope you've enjoyed today's video. And if you did, then why not like and subscribe? And you can get my updates every Wednesday and every Sunday at 8 p.m. Good times.